Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of AstroPath. And what you may not know is we have not seen each other in over a month. Jennie's been away, and our videos have continued coming out, and yet we haven't seen each other. So today we've decided to do something a little bit different, and we're just gonna do a little kind of interview of each other, ask some questions, and see if we can get an interesting conversation going to let you kind of know us a little better and our perspective and ways of using astrology and those kind of things. So we'll see what comes out of this. Before I continue talking, I want to say be sure to follow us, subscribe to our channel, like the video, give us feedback, follow us on other social media platforms, go to our websites, etc. All the information is below. The other thing with doing this kind of questioning process together today, we want to encourage you, if you have questions you would like us to answer in this kind of format, please leave those questions below. I really like the idea of doing more videos in this way. What do you think, Jennie? You think that would be fun?
Yes, I like this idea. And I really like the idea, especially putting the ball in the audience's hands too, like just to post some questions. I know we've gotten various comments about different things, but you could just very simply pose your questions to us. So I hope that you do that. And I like the interview format, and I feel like I'm going to learn more about you, Laurie, today, about what some of your thinking is around astrology, even though we've known each other for 15 years. That's another piece I always like, is to kind of hear like, whoa, I didn't know that. That's something new and different. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It is really interesting. I was poking around through some old charts recently within the last week or two and realized that the first time Jennie and I ever met to talk about astrology was 15 years ago. It's amazing. It seems like yesterday, and at the same time, it seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
There you have it. And what question do you want us to start with, Jennie? Or is there anything else
Yeah.
we need to say before we get there?
No, I was just going to add that for those of you who don't know, like that is when I started studying with studying with Laurie, and Laurie was my first and main teacher with astrology. So that was the beginning of that. And it's cool to see where we are now, and like it's been really awesome making these videos. And yeah, Laurie has given me a lot of opportunities over the years, so I appreciate that. So I
Well,
want you to
thank you, Jennie, because you've given me a lot of opportunities too. What you might not know out there is Jennie was my very first student and
know.
my first individual student. You know, I had done group classes and taught in that way, but I had never taken on an individual one-on-one student. And when Jennie first approached me and wanted me to be her teacher, I kind of flipped out. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But she convinced me, and here we are 15 years later. It really is amazing how our relationship and our work together has developed over 15 years. So, on to
Awesome.
our questions.
Yes. Well, the first one we just thought we had to answer,
Oh,
and we'll just have kind of a back and forth discussion about this, but is what is astrology, and how does it work? Big question, but Laurie, what do you have to say about that?
well, I have to say about that that astrology is many, many things. You know, there are so many different ways of working with astrology. And we could go into talking about, you know, we could take this conversation into directions that would last us for 2 hours of conversation. But on a very simple level, the way I think about astrology is it is just the, you know, the patterns that the planets make reflect what's happening here on Earth and in our own lives. I think of astrology so much as a reflection, as above, so below. That whole idea, you know, it's not, the planets do not make anything happen, they reflect what is happening. And I think really understanding astrology as a reflection between us and what's going on in the cosmos is the simplest way for me to think about what astrology is. How
Hmm.
about you, Jennie?
Well, kind of to add to your comment about, it's these patterns that the planets make. And then what's on our earth is kind of a reflection of those patterns. And I think just taking that into like adding on to that is just the idea that there's a kind of a mathematical truth to that, that there, as we look at these cycles, like, for example, like Saturn makes a big circle in the sky and it kind of divides into these 7-year increments. And that number 7 turns out to be really important mathematically in a lot of different biological processes and a lot of different things about our daily lives. So it really is a mirror, and it is. Yeah. Astrology just reveals patterns that are already there. That's really how I think of it. So yeah.
I think that's I think that's great. I think that's exactly, yeah, it, like we've both indicated here, we could go down a rabbit hole and talk about this all day.
Yeah.
Keeping it simple, what's our next question?
Yeah. Well, let me see. This kind of just goes straight from this question. When did you begin? Oh. How long have you studied astrology? Huh.
Yeah. Okay, so we just talked about when you began really officially studying astrology 15 years ago. What was your curiosity level or your process with it before that?
Well, I think my earliest astrology memory is I got a Leo bookmark when I was, I don't know, 5 or 6. And I still have that bookmark. I don't know why. I still use it. It has followed me around. I don't remember consciously making sure I didn't lose it. It's just kind of followed me around. And all these years later, I still have this bookmark. Wow. And I remember just seeing the symbol of the lion and then all these like character traits. And they kind of gave me something to strive for, to think about. I remember some were like confidence and, you know, just enthusiasm, and just as a child kind of being like, oh, you know, oh, okay, like I need to do those things, and trying to figure out how to do those things. Wow. So that's my earliest memory. And then I really got it. I remember going through my Saturn return, you know, so age 28, 29, somewhere in there, and somebody saying, oh, you're having your Saturn return. And I'm like, what's that? And so that really kind of spurred me starting to do some research. And then after that, I've just been hooked on it ever since. So that was like 22 years ago. So yeah. Yeah. What about you?
Well, you know, I think everybody's first memory of, oh, I'm a Leo or I'm a whatever the sun sign is. I think that first memory for most people in our culture comes around 5 or 6 years old. And I have my first memory of awareness of astrology was around age 6, 5 or 6, I'd say. In the grocery store back then, there were these little astrology books by the checkout counter. And I remember looking at those and seeing the symbols. And I just knew. It's really funny. I remember that moment of seeing those symbols and like, I have to know what those symbols mean. And I remember badgering my mother until she finally bought me one of those little books, which probably cost a whole 25 cents, you know, and holding on to it for years. I do not have it still. I wish I did, but I don't. But yeah, I became really obsessed with the symbols themselves. That was my first thing. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of resources. We certainly didn't have the internet to look up, you know, what does Leo mean or whatever. Yeah. But it took me many years to track down and find books that I could read and study. And that obsession never left me. I tried to get rid of it once when I heard all the discussions about house systems, and I decided I can't deal with this question of house systems. I packed up all my books and decided I was never going to study again, but that lasted about a year. And then my obsession grew even more from that. So I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll stop.
Well, there's a part B to the question that, which is just, you know, what have you learned through this study? Like,
oh my God.
Self and life and
oh my God. Oh, you want to answer that one first, or you want me to keep blathering?
I want you to answer that question because it kind of goes with your game. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. As a young person, I didn't like people very much. I really didn't like people. I mean, that's really the simple truth of it. I did not like people. And as I learned astrology And as I worked with other people's charts, I discovered this magic little thing that if I saw someone's chart, I could love them. I didn't just like them. I could see something in them
Mm,
that made all those barriers disappear. And I
mm,
could, yeah, that awareness of, oh my God, you are who you are because that's who you are, and
mm,
how can I dislike that?
mm,
So I really feel like astrology taught me to love people. That bottom line, that's
mm.
what it taught me. How about you?
Well, that's a beautiful answer, Lori. It really is. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so much I've learned. I mean, our questions like, other than the language of astrology itself, what have we learned, and it's like, so there's that piece to it. But I think so much about myself. I mean, so much understanding of like some of my struggles, some of the things I didn't understand about myself, like, and really, and kind of what you're saying, like, it really has taught me how to have better relationships with people. And it does give you a layer of objectivity of yourself, like your own maybe tendency towards self-criticism. It kind of gives you this objective layer where you're like, oh, it's a pattern. It's not me,
Right.
and then you can learn. It creates this space for learning. And then it really dovetailed really nicely with my yoga studies. I've been doing yoga for a long time,
Mm,
and meditated, and it just really supported that idea of self-discovery, and that as you learn compassion towards yourself, that it opens the door to compassion to everybody else. Like, it opens the door to having empathy and understanding that everybody's got their struggle, their thing they're trying to figure out. So ultimately, like you, like, it really has taught me how to yeah, just be in better relationship with people
yeah.
and be more compassionate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Now,
good.
with that question being answered by both of us, I'd like to go in a little different direction than we had planned.
What? So shocked.
Well,
That's
what
good.
that
Yeah,
brings up for
great.
me is one of our questions that we had later was, all right, so if you've gained all this and I've gained all this, which are really important things, how can people gain that from astrology without spending 100 years studying astrology? I
Right,
mean, really, how do you gain that understanding? You're certainly not going to gain that understanding by looking at, memes on social media about astrology, right? How
right.
can you, without a deep dive of study, get some of the goodness out of this study?
Well, I mean, I think some of the way to answer that question is that if you go and see an experienced astrologer, you sit down with that person, whether it's one of us or someone else, you sit down with that person, and in that time frame, you are in relationship with that astrologer. And that is where you have this unique connection that can happen where you really can see yourself in the astrologer's eyes, and kind of see how it all works really for yourself, your own experience. I think that's definitely one part of the answer to the question. What do you have to add to that?
Well, I think that really is the main thing. If you can do a little bit of study for yourself if you're interested enough to do so. You don't have to spend 100 years of study to get some of this.
Yeah,
But working with an astrologer, definitely, because the astrologer, a good, competent astrologer can see you in a very
yeah,
different manner than you might even be able to see yourself, and can help you see yourself more clearly.
yeah,
And if there are ways of working with an astrologer where you can work with not only your own chart but the charts of people you love, and
yeah.
the astrologer can help you understand these other people in your life as well. That's a big focus of my work right now, is helping people understand not only themselves but their loved ones. And
Hmm.
I think that's, yeah, you can study for 30 years, or you can work with me or
Yeah,
Jenny or both of us or another competent astrologer. There's a lot of
yeah,
great astrologers out there. There's also a lot that aren't so great. So, you really want to use your own discernment when it comes to working with an astrologer, just like you would with any other professional
Yeah.
that you work with. So, okay.
Yeah. And I also just want to add too that the gift of astrology really is around simplicity and clarity, and it's not around complexity. Astrology is a very complicated set of things with billions of different traps and tricks and rabbit holes and so on and so forth, but that's not really the gift. I think the true gift of astrology is perspective, and you don't need masses of education and complication to get that simplicity and to get that clarity. You just need to have that really good conversation and be open, be self-reflective and open to contemplating your own inner world. And I think that those two pieces, the simplicity and the willingness to be open, are huge,
Yeah.
to helping you forwards and using astrology in that way. So yeah.
That's a great, I'm glad you said that. That's great. Yeah, it does. It can get so much more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, studying for years. Yeah, if you want to do that, more power to you. I've done that. There's many things I love about it, but you don't have to. You really do not.
Right.
So
Right. Not everybody's going to turn into a total astrology geek like we are. Right. So, next question. What have your experiences been in the past month, and what personal transits have happened with you? What's been going on with you in this past month?
yeah, well, it's interesting. So for me, I went to Australia for a month. My
Yeah.
sister lives in Australia, and I haven't visited her there yet, and I've never been there before. So I finally, my partner and I was like, we're doing it. So we went, and it was very interesting because I planned the trip quite a way. It was a while ago. I bought the first plane ticket many, many months ago because I knew it was a long process and needed to eke it out. um, so I bought the ticket, whatever, just picked the time frame that worked. And then as we got closer to the trip, I realized as I was making these videos with Lori that my trip was sandwiched right between the Capricorn full moon, the first one we had in Cancer season, which was June 21st. And then the second one, which was July 21st. And it was this, month like bookended by these two Capricorn full moons. Like, check those videos out if you want to know more about the topics. But essentially, I just thought it was really interesting for me because it meant, at the first full moon, it was like it was right before I left, I was packing up and everything at that full moon, and then left. And then, the moon was waning the whole time that I was traveling there. And then I got there, had a couple days to kind of deal with jet lag, and then went into the desert. So I was in the outback in the desert in the middle of really just nowhere. There's just so little population there, for that balsamic moon, for that dark moon. So as the moon got darker and darker and darker, I was going further and further and further into the desert and away from people. And I got up really early one morning and I saw the dark moon rising, because the balsamic moon is the one that rises at dawn right before the sun. So I saw this sliver and I was like, wow, I've never seen that. I've never been in a clear enough place to see it. And the stars are incredible, So that was kind of my down to the balsamic moon. And then the new moon started, which I see as the kind of pick back up in energy. And so as that new moon happened, we kind of finished up in the outback. And then I won't go into all the details, but as the moon built in light, there was like more and more socializing and more and more kind of
Mm.
meeting of new people. And then I finally got to see where my sister actually is in Western Australia.
Mm.
But it was just a really, just interesting time personally. And then meanwhile, all this crazy stuff was happening in the US, like the politics, and watching from afar, like all of these different, what's going to happen next, and it just, wow, like to see that from afar and also hear Australians' opinions
Right.
about American politics, and have them ask me over and over again, like, do Americans realize how important this election is for the world? Like, do Americans realize what is at stake? Do Americans realize, how huge it will be, in either direction, but particularly if this country moves into an authoritarian direction, or if it moves into a more egalitarian direction, and just kind of, really interesting to not be having the American point of view, but the
Mm.
Australian point of view, and just asking, because the rest of the world has their eyes on this, so it was quite a powerful perspective to get and to have those conversations. So that's kind of like in a nutshell that, recent astrology and kind of the ebbs and flows of everything. So yeah, kind of a long-winded answer, but there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are there any particular transits, personal transits that are really impacting you through this process, through this
Well,
period of time? Or
yeah, I mean, Cancer season is in my first house, so I
okay.
saw it as a reset of my business, and how I was thinking about things, and also the Mars Uranus conjunction is opposing my moon and square my sun. So to me, that was a big kind of a wake up call. And here I am back here, and working on some rebranding and really putting myself out there as a wellness astrologer in
Uh,
particular,
yeah.
and I'm here to help you support your wellness and your relationships as well. So that has been really clear. So I think that was a big one. That's a big wake up. Like Mars Uranus is like a huge wake up call. So I feel like I'm that's the one that comes to mind. I know there's others, but anyway,
And I
yeah,
regret that we did not make a video about the Mars Uranus conjunction.
yeah, I do too. We're not going to let that happen again. So,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So
okay,
that month,
let's hear from you. Yeah.
while you were gone is a real blur when I think about it now. I don't have a lot of big outer planet transits going on. I don't have a lot of big stuff that's directly impacting my natal chart at the moment. The only thing that I'm really aware of is that Pluto having recently moved into my sixth house, and how, wherever Pluto has moved in your chart, and be sure you know it. It moved into Aquarius. It's still doing the little dance back and forth there. It still has one more little dip into Capricorn, but really pay attention to the area of your life where Pluto has moved. And I don't know. I have a lot of questions in my own mind. Well, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but that Pluto in my sixth house certainly correlates directly with the fact that I am now suddenly facing two complete knee replacements.
Mhm.
So that's huge. Right now, I can't walk. I can walk, you know, from my bedroom to my bathroom. And yeah, I'm definitely in a very powerful transition around my relationship with my body, my
Mhm.
relationship with my, that sixth house, my lifestyle itself, how I manage the day-to-day routines of my life, going up and down the stairs, having to lug the groceries. These are really profound things that we take for granted, that we can, manage these things in a certain way. And when the way we have managed our day-to-day life is suddenly quite dramatically, yeah, changed, it really makes you think. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because I've, been in some pretty dark places with it. But at the same time, I feel like this is opening up something that is going to really ultimately empower my lifestyle, my how I manage these things. A year from now, I'm going to have two bright, shiny new titanium knees, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to get myself strong and healthy on the other side of that, and create, I'm doing a lot of rebranding and changing of my perspective of how I do my business as well, like you mentioned too. And yeah, I think that ultimately this is a very important piece that's going to empower me. I'm not going to let it take me down the drain.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Well,
that's really what's going on in my life.
hmm. Yeah, that sounds very challenging. And, you really touched on a lot of the themes of Pluto, right, Laura? I mean, gosh, like having to face the fear of it, the pain, the dramatic change. But ultimately, like, I know that you mentioned going, oh, I got to do the surgery. But then you also just said to me even today, I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this change. Like, you're ready for that change. And I love that because it really kind of summarized the challenge, but then also the like, oh, but this is going to make my life better. The embrace of the difficulty
Well,
ahead. I mean, it's very plutonic.
it's really interesting because I picked up the other day. I don't know if you have a copy of it, or I think you do. I think it's Howard Sessportis, The Gods of Change.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
if you have a copy of that book, open it up to the section of Pluto moving through the houses.
Yeah.
And I picked it up recently and just opened it up to Pluto into the sixth house. And it just talks about, if you've had any underlying health issues, they're going to come up. And this knee thing is not new. I have had pain and problems with my knees for over 15 years. I
Mhm.
had surgeries 15 years ago. And this is a very, very, very old issue that I've been just babying along.
Yeah.
And now Pluto's like, it's fucking, excuse my language, it's time to get this handled.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty excited. I am.
Yeah. I think it's a good story though too, because I know people get kind of, oh my God, Pluto's moving here. What do I do? And there's a surrender to it. And also it's the more you can turn and face it and face the vulnerability, the struggle, the better. It's the resistance, the trying to continually turn away that actually creates more and more pain. So it's that the willingness to step forwards. And that's what I feel like you've shown. You're like, I gotta, because you could be handling this a different way, but like you're not, you're kind of, you're in it. You're like, here we are, I'm confronting this and I'm embracing this. And I know, so I want to really say that, because astrology is so much about perspective and, opening to perspective is not shutting down to fear or being terrified about something in the future. So it's a great example of that. So yeah. I'm
And that
sorry.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's really, it's one of the big things that I wish people would really understand about
Mm.
astrology is that, facing it's so easy. And you see this so much, the fear. Like, oh my God, Pluto's moving into my whatever
Yeah,
house, and oh my God, what's going to happen? Well, yeah, you've got to surrender to the change because Pluto's ultimate job is to empower us, not to
yeah,
destroy us. It's only going to destroy what is in the way of that empowerment. And
yeah,
yes, you have to go through fear and pain and all the rest of it. But, that's life. That's just
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think there's so much right now in the social fabric of things of like, you have to turn inwards. You have to face your own things in order to be operating healthily in the
right,
outward world. If
right.
everything you do is outward, you are neglecting an enormous source of information and or enormous source of balance, of health, of love. So it is a balance between what internal stuff you're willing to do and then how it affects you externally. And I think that's one of my big things in astrology is having people make that balance between how much of their inner life are they paying attention to and how does that funnel into their external life and vice versa. So anyway, I
Yeah,
think it's super
yeah.
important. Yeah.
It is super important. And I'm loving this conversation.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
don't
was
think
gonna
I don't think we're going to get to all our questions, but that just will allow us to make another video.
it's true. It's true.
So let's see what's
um
next.
well, I was gonna say, like, this question kind of dovetails right into number 4, don't you think, there? Like
Oh,
just this
yes, it does.
conversation we're having. So so basically our question 4, which I will ask you now, Laura, if you're willing, ready and willing, is, are there perceptions or beliefs in the way astrology is currently being used, that you think might be an issue or are leading people astray?
Well, I think that's a fascinating question for a number of reasons. And one reason I think it's fascinating is if you look at the history of astrology, it's just changed so much. It's a constantly changing process. There are ways that people use astrology that I think are definitely problematic. And it really ties in with exactly what we were talking about, the fear. Like, oh my God, Mercury's getting ready to go retrograde. And even, I talked to my son the other day, he's moving back to New England And he's gotten a new job offer and all this exciting stuff, but he's like, oh, but Mercury's going to be retrograde. Is it okay? You know, it's like, it's okay. It's okay. You know, we really have to be careful. If you talk to an astrologer or you encounter astrology that brings fear in, I think that's a problem. You know, not that I also think it's problematic if you use astrology to sugarcoat everything. There's a happy medium. You have to understand life. You have to understand the reality of life to understand that, you know, things are not one or the other. And,
Yeah.
you know, you see so much on social media that's just crazy astrology. And I think that anytime you work with an astrologer, you want to have an idea of really their level of authenticity.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, you really want to understand who you're working with. I don't know if I've even answered the question, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, it's a good one to kind of, just talk about our viewpoints on these things. Yeah, I think it's really important to bring up because I think for me, I just feel that I never want to advocate for somebody telling you how you are and how your life is supposed to be and that you're supposed to fit into some sort of external, thing that someone is putting on you. I that is never ever my
Mhm.
interest, intention, desire, anything to do with astrology. I am a huge proponent of critical thinking, so evaluating, doing the research yourself, looking things up. And I'm also a huge proponent of your intuition,
Mhm.
of learning how to listen to yourself. And that requires, doing healing work, doing stuff on your emotional being internally so that you can access your intuition, so that you
Mhm.
can really learn how to deeply, deeply listen to what your intuition is telling you. Because when you are plugged in to that, and when you are connected to the greater sort of consciousness of just life, it's not a religion or anything like that, but just then you do know you can, if you can deeply listen, then you will know what to trust and what not to trust, and then you can be open to having conversations and receiving guidance, but using your own critical thinking and your own gut feelings about which way you want to go. And there's a lot of astrology right now. Well, it seems to me just of kind of like people telling you who you are and what you're supposed to be doing because you're such and such sign and you're such and such thing. And it's just way more individual than that. And astrology cannot be boiled down to just your sun sign. You can get insights and clues from sun sign astrology. Like, I'm not saying don't read your horoscope column that you like to read, do it, but always be connected to yourself and don't let other people bully you or push you around into some other way of thinking.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, as far as astrologers specifically, well, let's see. First of all, when you're out on the internet getting your information about astrology, you want to make sure what you're reading, what you're looking at, who you're dealing with, because it's not always obvious if you're even, you know, there's so much, you know, Vedic astrology out there and Indian astrology out there, and you don't, and nothing against those systems. They're different than what we do as Western astrology. And if you're looking at something online, you want to make sure you're looking at, because it's not always obvious. Sometimes you'll be reading something and you're assuming you're reading Western astrology because that's what you're most familiar with. But if you look a little deeper, you might not, you might be reading something that's from a totally different system. So
Mm.
you really want to pay attention to that. And then as far as individual astrologers, I think what you said, you know, you've really got to follow your intuition for that. It's like when you work with, they say that the success of you know, like a therapist, like if you're going to a therapist, the method that they use is not nearly as important as how you connect with them. You know,
Yes,
your level of connection and understanding. And I think
yes.
that's the same with astrologers. You need to be working with someone that you feel like when you talk to them, you feel like you are seen. I think that's the biggest gift that an astrologer can give you, is to see you clearly and be able to reflect you back. And that's where you'll be working with someone that can actually help you understand yourself and get that perspective.
Yeah, well put. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great. And
Yeah.
I completely agree. So yeah. And you remind me, you said about therapists, that's always been my understanding about yoga. It doesn't matter what kind, it's the
Right.
teacher.
Yeah.
Do you connect with the teacher? Is it a teaching that you can work with? You know, that's the bottom line.
That's the
So
bottom line. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we have time for one more question. I'm going to let you pick it. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, we've kind of started to address how does astrology help you? I think we've kind of, is there anything else you want to say about, because we have this question, like, what is the main way we think astrology can help people? And like, what are your kind of hopes that people gain from this astrology consultations? It makes sense to me to address that. So,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I think we've kind of talked around that a lot, but just simply, what can someone gain is perspective. It's really as simple as that. Perspective on themselves, perspective and understanding of, yeah, themselves and the people that they're in relationship with. And what's more important than that?
Yeah.
If you can understand yourself, it's so easy for us to, I think specifically like oppositions in a chart, someone who has really strong oppositions in a chart, it's so easy for a person to embrace one side of that opposition, like this is me, and then, you know, reflect the other part that they don't like as much onto their partner or somebody else in their life, and really bringing those parts together and understanding that what they see as other is actually themselves, part of themselves.
Mm.
I don't know if I articulated that well or not, but
Yes, he did. No, yes, he did. That was great.
yeah, there's just so much of, really seeing
Mhm.
yourself in what you think is the other.
Yeah. And always feel like one of my key words, if I had to pick one word for astrology, it was the only word I could use, it would definitely be perspective,
Yeah.
and it's because there's astrology has a way of, there's you, and then there's like your issue, your struggle, your fight with your husband, or your whatever it is. Any can be anything, right? And astrology kind of inserts this layer of like a little bit of space, a little bit of objectivity. It gives you some symbols to work with, so it isn't so personal. And it gives you story. It gives you the story, the archetypes of, humans over thousands of years doing the same stuff. I mean, even though our culture is totally different, there's something that is always intrinsically human, that has been around since we were around and is still there. And it kind of gives you this connection to this much larger story. So it isn't just about you and your issues. There's a lot more to it than that. So it really breathes space and life into, whatever those struggles are, and maybe allows you to laugh about it, to see it. And I really like how you said, Lori, like bringing the opposite in, like yeah, exactly right. Like seeing how complex that each of us, is, and then like embracing the opposites we all embody. So yeah.
Okay, I want to say one other thing. I want to go back to the very first question we asked. What is astrology?
Yeah.
And I want to answer that in a different way or expand upon it. Astrology is the study of time.
Mhm.
And I think that we really need to remember that astrology is the study of time. And I think of, um, a massive river of time
Mhm.
just passing by. I mean, look at how everything changes
Yeah.
moment by moment, day by day. Like you said, the changes that have happened in the
Mhm.
world politically, socially, just in a short period of time. Life just keeps moving, time keeps moving, and things change. And when we are born, I think, one way I like to think about it is that one split second of that ocean of time is taken out and handed to you. And it's your job to work with the gifts and the challenges that are intrinsic, I can't even say that word, in that moment. And you think about all this change that happened in this past month. think about the babies that have been born and what they are coming in working with.
Mm.
You know, that Uranus-Mars conjunction. They're going to live with that. And,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that's really fascinating to do is look at the people over the course of time that have had that statement in their charts.
Mm.
Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
going to
Well,
go down a
that's
rabbit hole, but I think that's a way that I love to think about astrology.
yeah, it's a great image to think about, this river and just being part of that, intrinsically part of that river, maybe paddling that river, like being in it. And also just, yeah, take that idea of like each person being that little slice
Yeah,
taken out and here, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do
right,
with this potential?
right.
Yeah. And yeah, there is a lot of different ways to think about that astrology. And I think, I just want to add one more piece as well, because you got me thinking, and I'm like, yes, and I love that. The other thing I like to think of when I'm explaining astrology is just like it's kind of like a big map, and it's
Mm,
this big map that you unfold, and it's got all these like topo lines on it, and there's some mountains and some valleys and rivers and so on and so forth. And it's a map, it's a symbol of your life. And when you unfold that map, you can pinpoint where you are on that map using astrology, where you are in your life, where are you at in the cycles of life, what part of your life are you, are you in your 20s, are you in your 80s, like where are you? And it shows you a symbol of that terrain. And then it's up to you to actually be in the environment that the map is describing. Like you're the actual mountain, the actual valley, the actual river or trail,
yeah,
and are living
that's
that. And so
great.
that's kind of,
That's great.
I've been thinking about that, and I just, yeah, anyway, so
Yeah.
there's lots of ways to think about it, and those are two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
I love your
are
river time. It's great.
there are lots of ways to think about these things, and it's a powerful study, and I think we should wrap up this conversation.
Yeah.
And I would like to commit to doing more of these kind of conversations. So for those of you who are still with us, send us some questions, general questions, not questions about your chart, please, because we just can't get into all of that here, although who knows, we might do something different in the
Yeah.
future. But for now, give us general questions. This has been a
Yeah.
really fun, wonderful conversation. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. And yeah, what do you want to know?
Yeah.
That's what you should be asking. What do you want to know about astrology?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Lori. It's been really awesome talking with you. And I
Yeah.
did learn stuff about you. So thank
I
you.
learned new stuff about you too. Bye bye, Jenny.
Okay, bye.